This man is ransacking the place. A Siberian husky scared him half to death. Then 1, 2, 3 more came from all directions. And so the man was surrounded by a pack of huskies. He tried to escape the room, but the huskies pinned him to the ground and tore his brand new down jacket to shreds. The man's name is Dasan, and he is a skilled dentist. He received a will while at work that day. It says here that his birth mother passed away recently, leaving Dasan a huge inheritance in Alaska. Dasan was completely dumbfounded. His mother is right here. So, Mother took the opportunity to tell Dasan that he was adopted. After hearing this, Dasan immediately fainted. Although he could not accept being abandoned by his birth mother, Dasan ultimately chose to go to Alaska and to look for his biological father's whereabouts. The weather in Alaska was extremely harsh. Before Dasan could react, a gust of wind swept away his luggage. He lost his balance and fell uncontrollably onto the ice. He slid across the ice, freezing Dasan to the bone. Finally, with the lawyer's guidance, he successfully arrived in Alaska. Once inside, the lawyer publicly read the will. Then, a woman took Dasan to where his birth mother lived. Arriving at the house, Dasan looked at his mother's photograph. A smile appeared on their face, and just then, a border collie appeared, scaring them half to death. After barking at Dasan a few times, the border collie turned and left. It turned out the dog was hungry and carried its bowl, asking Dasan for help finding food. So Dasan started rummaging through boxes and drawers to find food for the border collie. That is how the opening scene came to be. A pack of huskies came from all directions. It seems the huskies did not like this black person. Dasan frantically found a frying pan, preparing to drive them away. Little did he know, a husky jumped from the second floor onto the table. Revealing its fangs, it stared intently at Dasan. The border collie, sensing trouble, quickly left the room. The husky leader leaped and tackled Dasan to the ground. Immediately, a pack of huskies swarmed, tearing Dasan's down jacket to shreds. The room was a mess. Luckily, Dasan finally escaped the room. Poor Dasan could only sleep in the border collie's bed for the night. Dasan was still asleep the next morning, but he did not know that the huskies were tearing apart his luggage. Dasan opened the door and was stunned. With no other choice, he found Annie and asked where the will was. Annie said that these dogs were his mother's legacy to him, and about your father's whereabouts. You could ask the black man in Jen who looks exactly like you. Maybe he can tell you. After Dasan found the old black man and asked him, he did not know his father's whereabouts either, and could only leave disappointed. Meanwhile, Dasan's toiletries bag caught Captain Monty's attention, looking at the swinging electric razor. Monty took a bite out of it. Then it set its sights on the toothpaste on the floor. It tried using its paw to press the tube and squeezed out the toothpaste. Monty opened its mouth and ate it. Just then, Dasan pushed open the door and called to it, then deliberately provoked the husky.
你想咬我吗？你想咬我？咬，来，咬。
Monty is biting Dasan's butt and won't let go. The helpless man spins around in circles. It turns out that the husky had just been eating toothpaste. Dasan, the mischievous one, deliberately provoked it. He wagged his butt in front of the husky, taunting it. He kept saying, "Come on, bite me." The husky instantly flew into a rage. It ran quickly towards Dasan, bit his butt, and refused to let go, in order to get away from the Siberian huskies. Dasan just started spinning in place. This dumbfounded the Siberian huskies nearby. Ultimately, Dasan shook off the Siberian husky for more than 10 meters. Dasan ran out and closed the door as fast as I could. It turns out Dasan was fighting with the Siberian huskies for the room. He has not slept in his own bed for a long time. The next day, an old man with white hair found Dasan. This old man was rather ruthless. He wanted to buy all the dogs for 200 kwai, but Dasan had no idea about market prices. Luckily, Annie appeared in time, saying, "Are you crazy wanting these dogs so badly? Each Shiba Inu is worth over $500 and the team leader Monty is worth $1,000. Please do not try to be clever in front of me." Annie also said that the Shiba Inu competition would be held in 2 weeks. First place also gets a substantial cash prize. Dasan's interest was instantly piqued, so he found a book about snow sled dogs. To check the basic information, with Annie's help, Dasan quickly got the huskies lined up. Before the training began, the captain, Monty, gave his teammates a knowing glance, and his teammates understood, nodding in agreement. Next comes the exciting part. To prevent the huskies from shaking him off, Dasan directly used tape to bind their hands together. After Monty looked back at Dasan with an evil glance. For the third time, Dasan sat directly in the car, letting the Huskies pull him along. This time, the Huskies could only obediently pull him along. Just as Dasan was feeling smug, the border collie looked at the skunk behind them and, seeming to know what was about to happen, jumped out of the window. Only then did Dasan notice the skunk behind him, but it was too late. The skunk turned around. The Huskies looked at Dasan on the ground, overjoyed. That night, Dasan found Annie and told her how the Huskies had teased him today, so Annie encouraged him to train the sled dogs. You have to take it slowly. You can't rush it. But in the end, they seemed to stray from the topic. The next morning, the Huskies were playing in the warehouse. Suddenly, a person in a red down jacket caught their attention. Seeing the familiar figure, the Huskies began to wag their tails. Once inside, they realized it was Dasan wearing their mother's clothes. The Huskies instantly calmed down and stopped causing trouble. They ran wildly with Dasan in the snow. Just as Dasan was rejoicing in his success, as expected, something unexpected was about to happen. Sure enough, a fox appeared in the distance. Seeing this, the Huskies got incredibly excited. They immediately chased after the fox. Because they were going so fast, the snowmobile crashed into a tree branch. Dasan did a backflip and landed heavily on the ground. Worse still, the hook caught his trouser leg again, and so Dasan was once again dragged along by the Huskies. A final drift sent Dasan flying tens of meters. Before he could react, a figure suddenly appeared behind him. Dasan looked back and saw a large brown bear staring at him. The brown bear pursued relentlessly, and Dasan, having no choice, jumped off the cliff. He landed on the ice. Just as he felt relieved, the ice suddenly began to crack. Dasan quickly jumped to another piece of ice, but ultimately, he fell into the icy water. Luckily, he was not a poor swimmer. Otherwise, he would have perished there. Dasan, having climbed ashore, was shivering from the cold. Dasan trudged forward with difficulty towards home. Unfortunately, the snowstorm was too severe, and he eventually collapsed in the snow and passed out. When he woke up again, he found himself in a cave. It turned out that this old man with white hair had saved him. The old man told Dasan, "You have lived in the city your whole life. This climate is simply not suitable for you." So Dasan decided to leave. He gave all his Siberian Huskies to the old man. Early the next morning, he boarded a plane home. Not long after Dasan returned home, the sled dog race was held as scheduled. He could only watch the Huskies compete on TV. Just then, his adoptive mother was looking at the photos Dasan brought back and accidentally dropped the frame, breaking it. Inside, there was another small photo. The photo was a picture of Dasan's biological parents. Dasan looked at the photo and discovered that the old man who saved him was his father. So Dasan returned to Alaska to find his father, but the old man was already on his way to the competition. To win the championship, the old man ignored everyone's advice. That night, he traveled alone through a blizzard. In the end, he did not win the championship, and he got lost. A rescue team searched for him, but ultimately failed. Dasan worried about the old man's safety, so he decided to take the remaining sled dogs to search for the old man, and he let his favorite border collie lead the way. So Dasan ran all the way through the blizzard, from day to night. Finally, he found them in a cave. The old man was being guarded by a pack of Huskies. Due to the weather, the old man had passed out. Under Dasan's careful care, the old man slowly opened his eyes. He also admitted to being Dasan's father and said he was simply unable to care for Dasan back then. I had no choice but to give him to his current adoptive mother. Early the next morning, Dasan wanted to fulfill his father's wish. He continued to compete with the Huskies, thus led by their captain, Monty. The dogs tried their best and rejoined the competition. When they reached a cliff, one Husky lost its footing and threw two people down. Luckily, the dogs were strong and pulled them up together. Meanwhile, everyone else learned that Dasan found the old man. They all arrived at the finish line, waiting for them. Soon, Monty and his brothers ran towards the finish line. Monty also took the opportunity to shock the border collie. The border collie was thus conquered by the Husky. Dasan and Annie finally came together. The adoptive mother and father were also relieved for their son. In the end, The husky and the border collie had puppies of their own. After watching this movie, should we all consider getting a Siberian husky? It can not only participate in snowmobile races but also bat its eyelashes.